Хорошо слышно. Я направила, значит, ссылочку в чат. Ссылка — это прямой эфир на наш канал Dignity 5351 в YouTube. Я Анара Ибраева, директор
My name is
общественного
Anara Ibraeva. I'm a director of the Public Foundation Kadir, and we will start a new series of discussion that would be held every fourth Wednesday of the month, starting from January to June, including, and this series of discussion is dedicated to recommendations of the fourth cycle of Universal Periodic Review and the review on the International Covenant on Political and Civil Rights. And this discussion is initiated by participants of coalition on the protection of civil rights activists, Public Association Kadir, and we are supported by a number of international organizations who supported us as in the process of alternative reporting in July last year to the UN Council on Human Rights. So what we're expecting from the discussions? First, we want that more nationals, more citizens know what recommendations were provided by the civil society. And there were quite a plentiful of civil society activists, and in November we attended as part of the Geneva meeting on Universal Periodic Review. We organized briefing, we provide recommendations, but not everyone has taken the floor, and 7 civil rights activists made their interventions, and there was a representative of permanent representative of Kazakhstan in Geneva who heard these recommendations, and there were 8 reports which the civil society submitted to the UN Committee on Human Rights. And these have been reviewed with the government early this year. Apart from explanation of recommendations that civil society has provided, we would like to focus our attention to some unresolved issues and discuss the updates on the situation with the human rights in Kazakhstan and raise other concerns related to the implementation of these recommendations, which Kazakhstan will or will not accept, but received as part of Universal Periodic Review on the 23rd of January. In 2019, this process started. The working group of the UN Human Rights Council submitted 245 recommendations within the first UPR, following the consideration of the second periodic report of Kazakhstan. And Kazakhstan did not accept all of them. So 245 submitted, only 214 were adopted, and 31 recommendations were rejected. In the first round, these were 129 recommendations. In the second, a bit more. In the third, even more. And now we're waiting how many recommendations Kazakhstan would accept as part of the first cycle of UPR. And every 3 years, every country, member of the United Nations, including Kazakhstan, submits this report as part of Universal Periodic Review. As you may know, and I said this before, our position on the protection and safety of civil rights activists prepared 3 reports. Those were Max Bokayev, Zhaslan Aitmaganbetov, Alexander Danchev, Ayjan Daribayeva, Musagali Daulov, Nina Yerkayeva, Tokjan Kizatova, Zinaida Prochenko, Arman Sadykov, Sergey Solyanik, Olja Sazdykov, Sergey Shutov, and we were supported by the Observatory for the Protection of Human Rights Defenders. It's a partnership between the International Federation for Human Rights and the World Organization Against Torture. And CT is presented by Mr. Andreyuk, who is going to take the floor today. The second report was, so the first was dedicated to human rights defenders, the human rights rights activists. The second alternative report, submitted in July 2024, was dedicated to the rights of women and girls in collaboration with the Windrock, Norwegian Helsinki Committee, Kostanay branch of Kazakhstan Bureau for Human Rights, Nursenin Public Organization, Natalia Minaeva, if you don't know, she's from Temirtau, and expert Aygul Agileva. And the third report, submitted in 2004, it was submitted as a follow-up procedure to the UN Committee Against Torture, prepared with a coalition of protection and safety of civil rights activists and a board of lawyers. So this is the format that we have selected every third Wednesday. If you forget, in Instagram, in Telegram, through other social media, we're going to inform. Today we have the first one, 29th of January, 26th of February, 26th of March, April 23, May 28, and June 25. So in terms of timing, I would propose to have the following, if you don't mind. So we have both representatives of the civil society and representatives of the state. And every participant will be given the floor, but according to the schedule that I have shared, some of the speakers were listed going on these recommendations and giving the update. Today, I will give them Zhaslan Aitmaganbetov, he is a civil rights activist from Karaganda, Yersultan Kenesbekov from Ust-Kamenogorsk, and Sergey Solyanik from Almaty. Zhaslan would share general recommendations, Yersultan, those related to the Ombudsman and human civil rights institutes, and Mr. Sergey Solyanik will be talking about civil rights activists and environmental experts and safety of civil rights. We have those who volunteered to take the floor. So if you wish to participate in the discussions, please put your name in the chat box of this Zoom platform, and we will write down. Shalipa Bekkulova, she will be talking about Ombudsman Darkhan Sharipov. He'll be talking about the threats to the civil rights activists and freedom of assembly. And Gulzada Serjan, she'll be talking about the rights of women, LGBTQ community, and feminism in general. If you don't mind, I'd like to give the floor now to Evgeniya Andreyuk as a co-organizer of this discussion, and then we will switch on the video from Guatemala in English. The interpretation is available. Pressing the globe sign in the bottom of your screen, you would be able to hear the translation or English if necessary, and we will have two presenters from Javier from International Service for Human Rights, Evgeniya Andreyuk. So those who volunteered and those who would come in the line. Evgeniya Andreyuk, International Organization Against Torture, OMCT, over to you, please. Thank you so much, Anara. If I understand, I can make my presentation on the core of the topic. Yes, you can immediately proceed to the content of a presentation. Yes, I will just let you know that we really welcome the discussions and we participated in the discussions which Kadir Kasyet organized on the final recommendations by UN Committee Against Torture, and it's good practice to discuss recommendations in details because this helps to better implement those. From my side, I will just brief you on the standards related to the Ombudsman Office because there were recommendations and recommendations will be written down on the improvements on Ombudsman, its autonomy, independence. I will explain what standards are there in this regard, and I would like to update you how you are going to proceed with these recommendations and in terms of autonomy, what can be done despite the new constitutional law was adopted. For this purpose, I need to share my screen, I think.
Да, уже.
Прекрасно, спасибо
Can you give me
большое.
the moderator right?
Спасибо большое. Одну секунду сейчас. Оп.
Thank you so much. Just a second.
Есть. И... Простите, всегда забываю ее презентовывать.
Надо на слайд-шоу назад.
Да. Я надеюсь, что так вам хорошо видно.
Видно.
Спасибо, спасибо, Гузина. Значит, как я сказала, не буду занимать много времени, но по основным стандартам
I
хотелось
will
бы
not
просто
take
напомнить,
too
от
much of your
чего
time,
отталкиваемся,
but
когда
let me
обсуждаем
remind
риски
you
в
what we
документах,
stem from when
которые
we
в
discuss.
описывают основные
There are
принципы в
two
отношении
large
работы
documents
офиса
which
омбудсмана.
indicate
Из них это
key
парижские принципы, которые
provisions.
такой
These
общий,
are
принятый Генеральной Ассамблеей в
Paris
1993 году. В целом, как
provisions
говорится,
which were adopted
предусмотрительный
by
документ,
UN General
он
Assembly in
довольно общий, такой закадровый,
1993.
под
And this
следующие
is a
моменты
very
тоже
general
немного
document
описывает, но
and
тем не
not
менее
as
основные
detailed
принципы
as I'm
парижских
going to
принципов
discuss
он
next, but the
закладывает. И,
Paris
возможно,
principles
как вы знаете, есть общая система
serve
государственных
the
национальных
baseline, and there is
учреждений
a
по
general
правам
accreditation system
человека
of national
в рамках
institutions
статус А
for
и
human
статус
rights,
Б и в
the
целом C, то
status
есть
A
статус
and status
второй.
B, or no
Этот статус
status at
как
all.
раз-таки
And
рассматривается,
this status
насколько то, как организован и как работает офис омбудсмана, соответствует именно
helps to
парижским
understand
принципам.
the
Поэтому
performance of
это документ
Ombudsman
руководящий,
office and
глобальный,
how it meets
целенаправленный.
the Paris
Да, ну
provisions.
основные принципы, опять же, вы все знаете, я не буду про них долго рассказывать, но самый первый, который парижский принцип
And I'm
ставит,
not
это
going to go
независимость.
into details,
Независимость должна быть
but
строго определена на
this is
законодательном
about
уровне. Есть совершенно разные аспекты независимости, как выбирается омбудсман,
independence,
как функционирует,
selection of
офис,
ombudsman
какие
operations,
полномочия есть, но точно так же, какая
what authorities
система
are
основания
there,
для отстранения
and
от должности,
what
кто
is
срок
the
полномочий, финансовая
grounds
независимость. То
for
есть это
termination,
самый основной
financial
пункт, который включает
independence.
очень много различных вопросов, как
So
функционирует офис омбудсмана.
this is general
Далее парижские принципы
principles that
говорят о том, что должен быть максимальный
are
мандат и
set,
максимальные полномочия, чтобы
maximum
покрывать
mandate and
максимальное
maximum
количество
authority
вопросов,
to
связанных с
cover
правами человека
as
и
many
по
issues
жизни,
as
как
possible
в
on human
работе,
rights,
так и с точки зрения
pluralism,
сотрудников, которые работают в
both on the
аппарате,
staff
чтобы покрывать
in
их
the
работу со
office,
всеми группами.
so that to
Следующие
cover
важные принципы, я
operations
упоминала,
with all
достаточное
the
финансирование,
layers of the
важно не
population,
только ради своей
enough
независимости, но и для того, чтобы
finance, and
просто эффективно
for the
функционировал офис. Состав
independence.
и назначение должно быть максимально
Composition and
инклюзивным и
structure should be
прозрачным,
as
в
inclusive
целом
as possible
прозрачность
and
и
transparent,
подотчетность обществу.
and then
Опять же, я не буду тут
reporting
читать, я поделюсь
and
этой презентацией тем,
accountability to the
если будут
people.
запросы,
I'm
кому
not going to
нужно,
go into details,
чтобы
but if
тратить
you
время.
need,
И еще
uh,
два
I will
принципа.
share
Это
the copy,
сотрудничество и
and two
правовая
more
основа,
principles.
которые эффективно должны быть закреплены на национальном уровне. Это как бы очень быстро основной обзор того, что есть в парижских принципах. Другой документ более детальный и более недавний. Это
One, just
венецианские
recent one,
принципы. Он принят Венецианской
Venice
комиссией. Они
principles
приняты в
adopted by the
2020
Venice
году.
Commission in
Этот документ намного
2020.
более
This
детальный,
document
и
document
целый ряд
is
вещей, они прописываются.
larger
Многие из рекомендаций,
and
которые даны в парижских принципах как общие, в венецианских принципах намного более детально расшифровываются.
those
Здесь тоже я
provisions
даю в целом
of general
общий
nature in
обзор, но
Paris
часто как
principles
бы
are more
сейчас
detailed than
все
Venice principles.
два эти документа
And
используются, чтобы
these are two
трактовать
documents are used
эти
to
друг друга. Опять же,
interpret
венецианские принципы
one
намного более
another, and the
детальные и
Venice principles
более
are more
недавние. В
detailed
венецианских
and
принципах
more
точно так же одним из
recent.
первых принципов
Venice
стоит
principles
независимость
also
национального
rely on the
учреждения. И, как я
independence
сказала,
of
да,
the
это достаточно
National
широкий
Ombudsman
вопрос, он
Office,
можно
and independence
обсудить
is a
и
wide concept which we can
всесторонний
discuss.
мандат, который включает
General mandate,
максимальное
which
количество
includes
вопросов,
as
и
many issues as
точно
possible,
так же прозрачное,
and
инклюзивное
transparent,
назначение членов,
inclusive
основанное на
nomination of
плурализме и
members based on pluralism of both staff and the ombudsman should be selected on the principles of competition and expertise, efficacy and accessibility. So the national office should be effective in work and be accessible and based on trust of the people, cooperation with other entities, transparency and accountability to both government authorities and public in general. And yet another thing that Venice principles include that the Ombudsman office should support the civil rights activists and intervene in case of violations or assaults or intimidation, freedom of expression, mandate and responsibility in addressing individual cases, because there are a lot of individual complaints, and what Venice principles require that not only individual cases should be there, but enough authority to address systemic issues which exist, but not go on case-by-case basis. And important principle which Venice principles confirm legitimacy, so that the office should closely work with the public, be trusted, and ensure accountability, which is open and transparent, and trust from the public to the national institutions. This is the overall overview of these two documents. I do this rather quickly, and I don't want to go into details because I'm sure you know these two documents very well. And should you have any questions or need for further discussions, we can examine some of the provisions more carefully. And let me also explain what recommendations include, and then proceed with discussion on the challenging issues that still remain systemic nature on a legislative level for the Commissioner in Kazakhstan adopting the new constitution.
Но, несмотря на это, по-прежнему пока что статус уполномоченного остается
Some of the provisions and of the
в этом цикле в первую очередь касается независимости офиса омбудсмана. И мне кажется, с точки зрения системных
remains
и законодательства это один из
ombudsman from the systemic perspective and from regulatory perspective is one of the challenging issues, especially for those who followed ODIHR provided recommendations on the draft law to the Venice Commission and
И поэтому именно эти вопросы, мне кажется, важно очень подчеркнуть.
And I think that it is important to underscore that the key issue is about election of the qualified majority, but not the general majority. There is a request from the civil society, which were reflected in the report to the Committee Against Torture last year, that in general the selection process, especially now when the president knows and Senate approves, so Senate should elect and vote, and then president confirms. And the role of president was underscored as important in election process, and the national organizations also recommend that the process of selection should be very transparent, and it should be preliminary selection process to which every applicant may apply, creating thus a short list, and then having shortlisted from which the ombudsman should be selected. But this is based on the available practices. Is important to know, to have this pre-election process for a longer list. The term of office, so the general practice that and recommendation is that the term of office should be long enough, but without re-election. So that 7 years is the term of office without re-election opportunity. Immunity. Despite the law providing this, we need to indicate it in more details. Then functional immunity for the ombudsman and the staff, and then special guarantees should be provided to the immunity of the offices, documents, premises, and yet another important bullet point from the independence point of view is resignation or termination of office. And I try to read this draft law for you.
Это несоблюдение требований и ограничений, установленных
Failure to comply
законом,
with
и это
requirements of the law, and this is the grounds.
Рекомендации остаются, чтобы он был уточнен, и чтобы не было таких широких оснований для освобождения от должности, а также для основания от должности должны
We
быть
should be very clear to
проведены слушания в парламенте для всестороннего обсуждения вопроса освобождения от должности. Это, мне кажется, те вопросы, которые остаются, и в тех рекомендациях, которые были, которые будут, как, например, усиление независимости. Мне кажется, это могут быть те конкретные шаги, которые могут быть сделаны для выполнения этой рекомендации.
To implement this recommendation, and as Zhanar said, we supported the report, and as we reflected in our document, there are two things which needs to be underscored very clearly. From our side, we would like to see more active cooperation.
И очень конкретно с точки зрения защиты правозащитников, насколько я понимаю, была и группа, рабочая группа по защите правозащитников, формально она остается, но стала носить более формальный характер, очень редкие встречи, мне кажется, это может быть очень важная площадка для более активного сотрудничества омбудсмана с гражданским обществом, особенно по тем вопросам, когда есть препятствования, есть угрозы, есть
activists,
поэтому эти две вещи я тоже вынесла.
Between the civil rights activists and the ombudsman and NPM, National Preventive Mechanism. There was a very good discussion when we discussed concluding remarks by UN Committee Against Torture and the concluding remarks provided by CAT about NPM in 2023. And if you are interested in a course discussion, we can go back to recommendations so that we know better what NPM is proposed. Thank you so much. That's it from me. And I'm ready to participate in your discussions. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Evgeniya. If you have questions, you can go directly. Or if you have comments, then as well, go on. I have a conference ongoing. I can't talk. I don't see any hands raised. You were talking about election. Can you hear me? Yes, I can hear you. So we talked about election of ombudsman, right? I would like to talk about the term of office. It's 7 years and elected by president. Comparing with other countries, countries of Central Asia, like in Uzbekistan, ombudsman is elected by parliament for 5 years. Deputies, members of parliament offer the nomination. In Tajikistan, also 5 years. It reads a bit different, however, if we compare with Kazakhstan, in Tajikistan, it was in 2002. In Kyrgyz Republic, it's also 5 years. But in Kazakhstan, we have 7 years of term of office. Also, it is president who nominates here in Kazakhstan with the approval of Senate for 5 years. Before that, we talked about 7-year term of office in developed countries like Europe, Sweden, where ombudsman is elected by the parliament, Riksdag, for 4-year time, for 4-year period, and it is members of parliament offering the nomination, and it is a plenary session which selects the candidate, and after election immediately starts the office. In Finland, 5 years. So what I'm alluding to, in many countries the nominations are put forward by the members of parliament, right? And in Austria, they have 6 years of term of office. 5-6 years is the term of office for many countries. Some countries have 4 years, and I think that lesser term of office is required to understand the efficiency of ombudsman and then give recommendations on the performance, openness and transparency of the process. And I assume that very strict requirements should set for the candidates, because this individual should have very high morale, in my thinking, and be professional competent. I mean that the individual should be experienced in the human rights area. I mean, work in this area, at least know how to deal with this agenda. Financial independence. Well, we know that ombudsman is paid from the state budget, and this finance, this funding is made to control the actions or inaction of this ombudsman, and we want more independency for ombudsman. This is what I wanted to add. Thank you so much. So you had a comment and your recommendation. Let's move to the video. I hope that interpretation will be working perfectly. So it is recorded video related to the protection and safety of human rights activists, and it comes from Javier Urizar, who represents International Service for Human Rights. He is originally from Guatemala. I hope you can see the screen. And now let me share this video with you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Javier Urizar, a Swiss-based NGO which focuses on human rights defenders and the international tools and mechanisms at our disposal, especially fourth cycle of its Universal Periodic Review. I will share international standards and relevant practices, key issues addressed, and which will certainly be discussed and what used by Kazakhstan and defenders to promote their implementation. Recommendations that we are going to be talking about. First is recommendation 138. Guarantee an enabling environment for civil society activity, lesbian, gay, bisexual. Recommendation 139.100 measures bloggers human rights. Then we have recommendations 139 by Niger, Togo, Asia, Georgia, Nepal, Uruguay, Republic of Korea, Moldova, Senegal, Serbia, Indonesia, Dominican Republic, and Iraq. Ombudsman's activity. Finally, recommendation 139.60. National Action Plan on Business and Human Rights, in line with the United Nations Guiding Principles on Business Rights. Now, what are the relevant standards that we are going to use? As local experts, we are much better equipped to determine whether Kazakhstan has complied with the recommendation. As an international organization, we believe we can support you by informing you of some relevant standards that international human rights law has developed for the protection of human rights defenders, HRDs. Related to the recommendations that we are these standards are compiled in the Declaration 5, civil society document that aims to serve as a topical to the UN Declaration of Human Rights. The Declaration 25 compiles legal developments on the rights of defenders and the state and other actors that have recognized in 25 years the original declaration was adopted. It supplements the UN Declaration and is meant to be carried along today. Together, they set the parameters and standards to protect the right to defend rights and those who exercise it today and for the next 25 years and beyond. Now, let's get to the analysis. The broader recommendation, which first of all, celebrate is an honor to fight for our country. As the original UN Declaration tells us, it is any group or organized society acts or seeks to act to promote, protect, or strive for the protection of human rights, self-freedom, local, regional. Declaration 25 note, international law has developed the record that human rights defenders workers actively any person regardless of their age or education or any other characteristic can be a human rights defender. While the UPR recommendation lawyers, media workers, international law establishes for example, lawyers that litigate media handles or bloggers who they are also international bodies have also officers, entire indigenous communities and administrative personnel among others. Well, these factors also have standards. For example, laws on the protection of journalistic national secrecy. They are also entitled to international law award and another international standard. Is that all HRDs who are being harassed were government to end the harassment. Also related is Article 2 of the Declaration Plus. I don't mention the right to defend, promote, and protect. Right. It stipulates another very development in international law. There is an autonomous right to rights, which the state must protect. In international law, there is a right to defend rights, and that any place the key aspects. Now move on to the second recommendation. Being an enabling environment for civil society to behave active human rights defenders of gender. Let's look at the first phrase of this. Enabling environment. What's an enabling environment? That's the 94 of the Declaration. Title right to respect the environment and the right to defend human rights. This article has three elements that an enabling environment for the defense of a conducive legal institution, which includes laws dedicated to protect and the modification or derogation of laws that restrict their rights. Two, fighting impunity and violations against strong, independent, and effective national effective protection policies mechanisms, including five, protection for risks, those working in global rights, which six, non-director as of the work of the seven, safe and open nations and international dynamic. They will have an environment where they will be able to the entire part of 25 relates in one way or another to these elements. Benefit from an right. However, beyond this, the Declaration of 25 also acknowledges at least requires action in addressing particular risks and protection needs. Section 199.48 LGBTI defendants, they have specific protection, typically both because of who they are and what they are. 6 of the Declaration of 25 is articulated standards relevant to this. Hey, they should recognize everything to guarantee the safety and protection of our risk and including the gender identity and the issues not and context they work during is that states shall adopt collective and intersectional approach, guaranteeing the state protection of the right. Which should record how they protect context in which they work, discrimination, risk, and if it's state targeted mind with about lady. Enough of think of that no actions were taken aimed at addressing the protection needs by to ensure an immune environment that, among other measures tailored to the needs of the ID defender that align with the issue of the panel. There were multiple recommendations on the protection of guide and advise government make it work. That's the article indicates that states should adequately resolve independent right institutions upon Paris principles. Kazakhstan's Commissioner for Human Rights has a B rating, meaning that they Paris and effective can effectively protect the human rights of independence. Environment in defense of We like the standards, which are planned by pieces to protect us. Develop the plan line with the United Nations guiding principles. One of the concerns frequently raised by that of business in several locations have become responsible for violating the right of defending capacity for international law to address this and impose obligations to ensure companies and other private actors do not violate the right. This development in Article 18, which states that consultation by the defendant, including financial institutions, to ensure that their activities, actions, not restrict, violate the right to the right. Those cases shall again address facts of human rights activities. National Action Plan on Business and Rights as the work they should not permit. It's just article and to outline some of the elements of by it's how you use the declaration when engaging with UPR recommendations. And as well as monitoring the implementation. As mentioned, the declaration developments in international 25 years since the UN declaration that was about sources and jurisprudence to back them up. I would annotated version to solve the sources. Also, other resources that we provide you with standard. Standard. You have any questions? All right, forward them to me.
Thank you so much for the translation. We carefully listened to the video record of Javier Urizar, who acts as a co-host of this series of discussions. It is International Service for Human Rights. Let me now proceed with the speakers. The floor goes to Zhaslan Aitmaganbetov. Please, Zhaslan, over to you. You can introduce yourself and explain what you want to talk about. And we are going to cover three issues: general recommendations, Ombudsman Institute, and provisions of ecological conditions of ecological activists, and the link with the human rights advocates. My name is Zhaslan Aitmaganbetov. I'm a head of the Eurasian Human Rights Company, and I represent the General Commission with some other people on the protection of human rights advocates under UPR in terms of numbers and compliance of Kazakhstan. I will start with general assessment on implementation of recommendation 139 about creating enable environment for the civil society and protection of human rights activists. So general assessment is not complied. So we don't see any better in Kazakhstan. The number of threats that the human rights activists receive in 2020, 2024, 1,414 and 1,586. Comparing to 2019, 733 cases, decreasing down to 995 in 2022, 374 in 2023, and despite decrease in threats in 2024, 518 cases of threats to HRD were registered. It's about updated statistics on the threats. During the protests and natural disasters, emergency introduced 3 times in Kazakhstan, COVID in 2020, because of protests in January 2022 and in spring of 2024. Those were in few regions because of the flooding events. In this time, these human rights activists and civil rights activists are exposed to the threats. They are being detained as a prevention and intimidation for their active position. They are interrogated. There were cases recorded on tortures and harassment. However, Kazakhstan did not inform UN about their deviation from the provisions of the Covenant on Political and Civil Rights. More than 330 people died in last year in January 16. As for the harassment of HRD, the members of the National Preventive Mechanism were exposed to different threats and detention. In January 2023, Sergey from Kyzyl was detained. We remember the case of Vikram Ruzakhonov of Kyrgyzstan, which demonstrate that government is not really willing to punish for tortures, because on his case, only 3 years was the imprisonment, was the sentence on this case, and most likely they will not serve it properly. On his case, we know that there was a motion filed for the psychological damage, but it was not considered properly. And the public association Kadir Kasiyet was pulled to administrative responsibility for Article 460 of Code of Administrative Violations as a warning in August 2020 for not indicating donors as customers. So they should have published this in the UN Committee collection of recommendation to Kazakhstan, and it took 4 months before it was recognized illegal, and 12 months to get the indemnity from the Ministry of Finance in 2021 September. In October 2020, more than 20 HRD companies were made liable for Article 460 for incorrect or wrongful submission of a financial statement on the foreign finance. The penalties were applied for minor technical errors under the tax code and codex of administrative violations. The code of administrative violations, Article 27, was used to punish against the violation of the law on organization and holding the peaceful assemblies. Then, types of responsibility which are usually used: a violation of law of Kazakhstan on public associations and management and participation in the public or religious associations not registered under the legal procedures and financing of their activity, Article 489, violation of law of Kazakhstan on non-commercial organizations, Article 481, and on religious activities and religious Article 19.
Констатируем, что государственные органы не защищают правозащитников, относятся к ним негативно, не предпринимают действий в осуществлении защиты их прав в ситуациях воспрепятствования их деятельности. Например, не принимают мер к лицам, которые целенаправленно мешают журналистам, загораживая обзор камерам, когда они осуществляют свою журналистскую деятельность. Иногда они делают это с нескрываемым чувством мести. Даже была информация о некоем подразделении политической полиции, которая действовала против правозащитников под видом борьбы с экстремизмом и экономическими преступлениями. Эффективность средств правовой защиты остается иллюзорной для правозащитников,
Effectiveness of remedies remains vague for the journalists, for the human rights defenders, and the national mechanism for the protection of HRD is not established. The regional ombudsman representative come from the
Вы могли,
former
пожалуйста, чуть-чуть медленнее говорить, там с переводом не успевает же. Ага. Спасибо.
from former police officers. Let me stress that Art.Rukh.Hack, he is a former general prosecutor officer who was nominated by Ombudsman in December 2022. And as we may know, we raised this issue before, that in this case, Ombudsman failed to perform key objectives, and Ombudsman Institute is very passive these days. We don't see efficacy of this work. The working group on the protection of HRD, established in September 2022, it was established by Ombudsman Elvira Azimova. So it is a group of HRD is being ignored. Over the past 2 years, this group has held only one meeting without any outcomes. We don't see any results. Any of the cases related to the protection and safety of HRD has ever been reviewed. Next. In the end, I'd like to talk about general recommendations on the coalition for the upcoming review in Kazakhstan to establish a special committee to investigate cases of January 2022 on the level of UN and OCE by inviting international and national experts of HRD to establish a special rapporteur in UN for the developments in Kazakhstan, to establish in the law of Kazakhstan the procedure for implementation of the UN treaty bodies and a special UN body on human rights by amending the code of procedures, which oblige courts to revisit their judicial rulings enacted by UN bodies and special procedures of UN bodies on human rights. To fully implement into national law and enforcement practices the international standards for protection of HRD, including UN Declaration on the right and obligation of individuals, groups and bodies, society to protect and incentivize well-recognized human rights and freedoms, Declaration on Human Rights Defenders of December 1998, to exclude from the law on countering terrorism, on the law countering of extremism and legalization of proceeds from illegal sources and financing of terrorism, of tax code, Code of Administrative Violations, Articles 174, 179, 182, 258, 260, 404, 405, 214, and 218 of the Criminal Code of Kazakhstan, the provisions which discriminate the non-commercial organizations and countering the provisions related to human rights, including recommendations of FATF and against corruption. On a political level, the government has to recognize the role of human rights activity, guarantee and protect rights of every individual on the freedom of expression, freedom of assembly as the grounds for development of democracy and participation in the affairs of state. We should stop treating the peaceful assemblies and HRD as sources of extremism and accept adopt a law on the national mechanism for the protection of human rights defenders. In conclusion, the Ombudsman's activity should be resumed immediately, including the working group on the HRD, and stop ignoring the cases of threat against HRD, taking the necessary remedies. So these are the recommendations which we hope that the government would accept and implement, because this is necessary to develop the legal democratic state. Thank you very much. Thank you so much, Zhaslan. This was about general recommendations. Let me remind you that in January 23, when Kazakhstan or delegation of government of Kazakhstan presented their report as part of the fourth cycle of Universal Periodic Review, the chair of the working group on UPR reminded that any threat to the human rights defenders, activists, and citizens for the cooperation with the United Nations is not accepted, and this shows commitment of UN to the protection of human rights defenders. And let me remind you before, I don't know, if you have any questions, please prepare them. And today the appellate body, the court of Astana, the ruling to Danyar Adelbekov remained in force. And another thing, in September last year, with our partners of Kyrgyzstan, Spravedlivost of Jalalabad, and in Tajikistan, Center of Civil Freedoms presented the first index of protection of HRD in 2023, which demonstrated a few trends, which you can find in our website Kadir tag report with very good infographics, in Instagram dignity.kz. And now I'm trying to find any comments or questions in the chat box. May I take the floor for some comment? Yes, please, of course. Yersultan. I fully agree with Javier, who made a presentation and proposed recommendations which Kazakhstan did not accept in full. And Zhaslan Aitmaganbetov talked about the events of harassment which are still not covered by Ombudsman. And in terms of global experience in the Netherlands and UK, there is a special association of Ombudsman which serves as a platform for regular meetings of Ombudsman office and people, NGOs, HRD, and other entities keep communicating with Ombudsman, and they have online and offline meetings on a regular basis, and this mechanism is missing in Kazakhstan. Belgium and Spain, they have a CRM system to process information, i.e. a complaint is filed, and then they process this together through the system. Unified management system for grievance handling in countries, they managed to address it. I mean, they cover this on the NGO level and government level as well, building capacity of the Ombudsman office. So this Ombudsman, as Aitmaganbetov said, they should receive training, they should build their capacity, and this is how they should be experienced in protecting the human rights and become the ombudsman. They should not work in law enforcement agencies or prosecutor's office. They should be working in human rights activities for 5 years to become ombudsman. Publication of reports on the performance of ombudsman representatives. Yes, we do this, but in Canada, they publish these reports and they can be discussed widely with the civil society. And there is a special platform where NGOs and civil society may express their opinion and affect or impact the ombudsman. I talked about election process, and now the hotline should be established for processing of information. So this hotline would be working that every individual, be it citizen or human rights activist, can call in case of threat to the ombudsman office, and this call should be recorded, including every violation taking place in this time. Next, monitoring procedure. Tamerlan Isimbekov and others were detained. An ombudsman, in my thinking, should have be taking active part and follow on the legitimacy, the validity of work of law enforcement authorities.
Ну, в принципе, вот то, что я хотел добавить именно к тому вопросу, который раскрыл для нас Zhaslan Aitmaganbetov.
Thankful to Zhaslan Aitmaganbetov for explaining the recommendations. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Yersultan. We have other speakers. I'd like to give the floor to Shalipa Bekkulova, who represents the Public Association Art.Rukh.Hack. Shalipa, over to you, please. Hi, I'm here. Thank you. Can you move your camera because we just see your forehead a bit more? Please, over to you. Art.Rukh.Hack is a civil society organization which carried out the comparative analysis of the performance of previous Ombudsman Azimova and A.Lastaev over the past year. So comparing the performance of these two ombudsmen, we try to answer the questions such as if they understand their mission as the human rights defenders and what they are doing, if they really protect the human rights and guarantees. Azimova was very actively working with the NGO and civil society to identify any challenges related to human rights. Azimova prepared a draft constitutional law on the High Commissioner for Human Rights of Kazakhstan, which was adopted in 2022. Also, she proposed to amend the laws aiming to improve the protection of human rights. Elvira Azimova participated and had her position in January 2022 on the restoration of rights of detainees. She visited institutions where events took place in 2022. She tried to place the wounded individuals to prisons, and then she also participated in the pretrial restriction, so she replaced it for some softer punishment. Azimova also talked to the chair of the Supreme Court and General Prosecutor's Office on the access of HRD to the hearings of January 2022, which were allowed in, observers, HRD, and mass media. Lastaev, as ombudsman, initiated since 2024 the jury for minor crimes and also investigation of tortures in prisons. Also, he helped in exercise of prisoners' rights in receiving higher education, and the proposal to analyze and improve the law ombudsman gives just formal answers, so he did not exercise his right to file complaints to court and constitutional court, and he did not make any public statements. For repetitive requests to visit the places of custody were ignored by the Ombudsman Lastaev, and for political prisoners, the concerns raised were not properly addressed. Marat Lambaev, the famous marathon runner, who has been announcing a strike for the 6 or 7 times already for disagreeing with the closed court hearings and disagreeing with the living conditions in the prison number 4 in Stepnogorsk, and the strike was announced due to the unsuitable conditions in prison, and we talked to ombudsman to personally visit these 2 individuals, but he didn't do yet, and we filed a motion in the name of the president, and speaker of the Senate was offered as the nomination for ombudsman, and Ombudsman Lastaev received these proposals, and these are still pending. Ombudsman by law may file a case to the court. Ombudsman can send proposals and recommendations, but neither Azimova nor Lastaev have ever taken this advantage. Upon requests, Ms. Azimova was responding, including the comments from the state authorities, and Mr. Lastaev, in his formal requests, in his formal answers, says that ombudsman is not allowed to share private data of certain individuals without their written consent. So we are asking about the political detainees who sit in prisons, and then it appears that they have to offer their written consent on disclosure of their private information. As for open, impartial court hearings, in case of Makhambetov Abzhan, when we addressed Mr. Lastaev, he referred to the Constitution of Kazakhstan, and he responded that any intervention to the court in the administration of justice are not allowed. Duman Mohammed Karim was demanding the open court hearing, and Ombudsman Lastaev requests from the HRD the letter of proxy, so that Duman Mohammed Karim would write a letter of attorney, and we can, on his behalf, talk to Lastaev. As for the closed hearings, One of the detainees said that he's going to stitch his mouth as a disagreement to the closed hearing, and Mr. Lastaev never responded to this case. Azimova addressed to Akit Katchi of Kyrgyz Republic on human rights defenders and the National Center for the Prevention of Torture, Diana Baymagambetova and Askhad Jiksebaev, who made a statement on Asia Tulesheva. A decision was made by court on the suspended sentence and immediate release from detention. And Mr. Lastaev said that he cannot monitor the in the court processes, and he formally gives an answer that it's not possible for myself or for representative to participate in law cases because of heavy workload. He also does not responding on the request for indemnity to the victims of January 22 events, and he did not offer his position on the pressure of a lawyer who represented interests of political detainees, are Asghar Siembai and Marat Zolambayev. And Mr. Lataev provided a response which reads that lawyer, equally to other participants in the criminal case, has to comply with the provisions of the Code of Criminal Procedure of Kazakhstan. So the investigator issued a resolution to bring to responsibility the lawyer who disagreed about prohibition to disclose the case materials. Shalipa, would you please go a bit faster? Okay, I'll try my best. Ombudsman Lastaev on cooperation with NGO requests a letter of attorney for the political detainees, requests the official written consent from the detainees, and gives just formal answers to any request. By analyzing the situation, we gave the following recommendations: more transparent and open publication of investigated cases, resolve systemic violation of human rights, provide respective authorities recommendations on the restoration of human rights and freedoms, and bringing into responsibility those officials who violate the human rights, comply with the key principle, responding to violated human rights regardless of the violation, and review every citizens and HRD regardless of the language or other formal requests, assess the performance of the ombudsman and regional representatives to build responsibilities. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Shalipa, for your analysis and good overview of performance of two ombudsmen, Ms. Azimova and Mr. Lastaev. And I would like to stress your attention, dear participants and visitors and followers on YouTube, because we are live streaming in Dignity 56 YouTube channel, that having the performance appraisal, this was included in the presentation in early spring last year. So a year passed, and we still don't know what Mr. Lastaev has done to progress, because we made a big presentation, we discussed it, and we proposed the criteria for such performance appraisal. Let's wait till March. If nothing happens, I mean, if there is no measure undertaken, then we can do it ourselves. We will assess the performance of Ombudsman, because there should be some public control, because this individual is taking very high-level position, government position, so he takes salary from the taxpayers, and we are very much interested in receiving information on whether he takes into account the voices of civil society, human rights defenders, and so on. Do you have any comments related to this meeting? Please raise your voice. I see representatives of the state authorities. You can take the floor as well. I don't see anybody. So let's proceed to the next presenter. Yersultan Kenesbekov, recommendations on the review of fourth round of UPR to the government of Kazakhstan, and two parts of recommendations on the protection of HRD and improving the performance of Ombudsman. Yersultan, over to you. Well, I've briefed before on what needs to be done in order to improve the situation on the protection of HRD, and what needs to be done in order to improve the performance of Ombudsman, because some of the recommendations from HRD side were not implemented. Let me add that our recommendations of the coalition on the Universal Periodic Review in Kazakhstan is important situation, important step. These recommendations are aiming to protect the HRD and improve the performance of Ombudsman office. In terms of ensuring protection of human rights defenders, HRD in Kazakhstan regularly face different threats, including physical violence, intimidation, and force. And previously we talked about Бахчан Туригожина и Жовтис, получают Евгений Жовтис, and Evgeniya Zhovtis, reviewing the Kantar events, where a lot of commitments were not performed by the state. And in order to improve their protection and creating safe environment for the coalition, so coalition undertakes certain measures, adopting the law on national mechanism of protecting the HRD human rights defenders. And I believe that this law should be taken as promptly as possible, because time is passing, and some of the HRD require very strong legal support and independence of these institutions who can help. So this law should be based on international standards, and in the model law, international HRD entities proposed some improvements, and this includes protection of HRD from threats and violence, and mechanisms of their legal and physical protection. Number two, effective investigation of threats against HRD. So investigation should be on a case-by-case basis, and this should be in time and very effective. We should make the perpetrators liable to demonstrate the resolution of the state to protect the human rights defenders. This would help increase the trust of people to the state, in my thinking. Bringing it to responsibility, it will improve the safety and protection for HRD, making them feel feel more comfortable and reinforcing the civil society as a whole. Ombudsman plays an important role in protecting the rights and freedoms of citizens in Kazakhstan. However, certain actions raise questions. Election of regional representatives of Ombudsman from the civil society. We believe that regional representatives is an important step to improve the connection between the civil society on the ground and Ombudsman, and electing the regional representative from the active HRD community would make it more open and transparent and accessible to people. The majority of ombudsmen on a regional level or Republican level, they are elected from the law enforcement authorities. I would recommend that ombudsman is elected based on their at least 5 years of experience in civil society, protection of HRDs. This would help build the trust to the Ombudsman office because this civil society, the Ombudsman representing civil society would know better the situation and what's happening on the ground. This includes organizational independence and financial independence, because if they are dependent from the financial perspective, even if we as taxpayers pay for it, then there is certain tools of pressure. Paris principles were developed by the United Nations, and they set standards for national mechanisms of human rights, including impartiality, objectivity, and engagement in the in this human rights work. Then cooperation with the civil society and public reporting, as I said before, in Sweden, every week, every month, they hold meetings with the civil society, both online and offline. Ombudsman should be actively working with NGOs, human rights activists and other actors to ensure diversity of opinions and appropriate human rights protection. So this should be an annual public reporting that would improve the transparency and performance of Ombudsman, and it would help citizens and companies to follow on the progress and offer proposals on improvements. Recommendations by coalition of NGOs are aiming to improve the situation with the protection of HRD and improve the performance of Ombudsman. So this help improve the state takes seriously these recommendations and undertakes measures.
Да, пожалуйста, если у кого-то вопросы есть, можно только сейчас спросить, или если есть комментарии, тоже сказать об этом. Пока не вижу в чате ничего и поднятых рук тоже, поэтому предлагаю сейчас, у нас есть инициативный спикер Дархан Шарипов, представляющий инициативу ОЯН Казахстан. Дархан, пожалуйста.
So we have Darkhan representing Darkhan Sharipov, who represents the CSO OYAN for political reforms. So we have a public campaign to protect Zhaslan Aitmaganbetov. I'm sure you know he is an author of Kaz News 24, who is brought to liability for
межрасовой розни, если подробно об этом рассказать. По поводу того, что мы хотим сейчас сделать.
On the grounds of hate speech. So what we want to do actually,
Мне бы хотелось, конечно, больше, чтобы была информационная
we
поддержка
should provide
со
information
стороны
support
гражданского общества.
from the civil society
Первое, что мы
side.
хотим сделать
Number one,
сейчас.
what we want to do.
Сейчас, минутку.
Just a second.
Некоторые мои коллеги по гражданскому обществу, они, наверное, знают и в курсе всего, что происходит.
Some of my colleagues are aware what's
Сейчас мы видим,
happening,
да, что
and we can
государство
see
пытается
that the state
посадить
is
гражданских
trying
активистов
to put
за сатиру, за то, что они критикуют наше государство в
the civic activists
форме творчества, в
for
форме сатиры
into
на своем
prison
паблике,
for
который называется Хозяин
the
24. И мы видим, что 20-я статья Конституции
satire,
нарушается нашим государством.
and
Первое, что мы хотим, это
the
чтобы
provisions of the Constitution are violated by this. So the law on peaceful assembly should be amended. We see it's not working, and as a matter of fact, the peaceful assembly are based on permissions, but the law directly states that the peaceful assembly should just be based on notification. And then the solo PK, or single person protest, are rejected by the local authorities. Peaceful assembly authorizations are not granted by the local akimats, and there were some demonstrations in the protection of Zhaslan Aitmaganbetov, and many of participants were fined, and Article 174 to 174 of the Criminal Code that is used for political prosecution should be taken from Criminal Code to Administrative Code, or it should be terminated at all. And
обстоятельствами в другие статьи, уже имеющиеся статьи Уголовного кодекса. Что еще?
The aggravating factor should be taken away from the Code of Administrative Violations. The phone of Tamerlan Insibekov, they tried to hack it, which is another illegal action from police side. So his phone is blocked, and lawyer of Tamerlan Insibekov, Zhanar, Bolgabayeva, has filed a complaint on the situation. On Ombudsman, I don't know who we should talk to, because we started a public campaign of letters to General Prosecutor's Office, but some of the people who follow on this, they say that General Prosecutor's Office responded to them that they will keep an eye on this, keep track of it, but we don't know what eventually will happen. So if you know anything on this public campaign, just let us know. Well, in general, we can say that what are your expectations from the state authorities, depending on the competence? Okay, Ombudsman, Ms. A.Lastaev, what would be your expectation from him? I'm sure he would hear this, because the staff, the officers of the National Center for Human Rights regularly attend our meetings and public discussions. They hear and they are online, like Dinara Abdrahmanova. I think that your request would be followed. Well, first, transparency of everything happening, because it's not clear. We see police trying to hack the phones of Tamerlan Insibekov. They try to impede the work. Number two, the Article 20 of the Constitution is being violated, and people can use satire or Pasquale for expressing their views. If the court will take place, would like to see more transparency, because the courts late on Friday night or behind closed doors is wrongful practice, and we voted against the closed door hearings on the HRD. And I hope and we will guide the public campaign. Can we use EUTNISH platform to submit a complaint to Ombudsman directly? Yes, EUTNISH has the tab on the Human Rights Ombudsman. Yes, we want this to be carefully controlled, because people are embarrassed with what happens in Kazakhstan, and they're really unhappy. Thank you so much, Darkhan. Darkhan is not just an accountant or activist of a civic movement or Young Kazakhstan. He is a member of Coalition for the Law on the recognition of the human rights work. Let me move to the next part, and I have a question. Do we have volunteers to take the floor or answer or comment on something, please? I have a question to Darkhan, with your permission. Sure. I'm glad to see you, Darkhan. We haven't seen each other for a while. And I have a question to you. What measures are undertaken, and what we are planning to do next, and what is necessary from the state, from a civil society, how HRD can help you? So we need information support. It's number one. Because there are comments of HRD, such as Tatiana Chernobyl, that the article under which he is brought liable and materials he's charged for songs, not of his authorship. It was a song still publicly available at any platform. So he is brought to responsibility for terrorism grounds. But he is blamed of terrorism, and he is kind of prosecuted for his satire, for his publication. But this does not help. We see that still this public is working, and they release news, and people support, and they comment, and we see the number of subscribers is growing geometrically. And people that never knew this public, they know it. And we see a lady who is detained for her one-man protest. Satire is not a crime. In Astana, we saw a case of single-man protest, and another individual was filing a request to Akimat about Seoul one-man protest, and it was rejected. Another motion was filed on the place of peaceful assembly, and she was rejected by an excuse that that day was already booked. And when she went to that place, she found that no one was there. And we see that the law on peaceful assembly does not meet the international standards. So, and the so there is no need to ask for the permission for a single-person protest according to international standards. I think that we need to push this knowledge out. People are unhappy, especially with the latest reform in the tax law. So we need to move on. We need to explain people what they're entitled to, including their right for peaceful assembly and express their opinion, including the tax reform as well. Yes, I'm sure that you've heard that they want to increase the VAT threshold. Yeah, so they want to reduce the VAT threshold to 15 million and increase the VAT rate to 20%. And I'm sure that many people will suffer from that. They also increase other prices, so there are a lot of components. And this public campaign is as relevant as never before, because we're going to also the fines are increasing. Yes, 30 billion of fines were collected. Yes, it's kind of making the situation like more squeezing, more pressing. Well, as for Tamerlan, well, I have some projection that he would not be released. Unlikely he would be released. And the better outcome would be, in my thinking, that he would be prohibited from this. He would be prohibited from having this public activity, and unlikely he would be able to maintain his public. We have Zinaida Prochenko from Kostanay. She is the coordinator of a group of observers in the courts, including the HRD. Hello, I have a comment, a very short one. I monitored some of the proceedings on this topic. In Kostanay, we had Zinchenko, and I'm surprised by the fact that the charge was single-person protest and demonstration of a jacket. The trial court, single demonstration of a jacket, picketing, and the Court of Appeal ruled organizing a single-person protest and organization of a meeting to support journalists. So he said that he was supporting journalists. And this phrase is a meeting in their thinking. I don't know. Meeting is when you push forward some requirements, some demands. But if there is nothing like this, then how you call this a picket or a meeting? And Darkhan, yes, very active young people you have. Keep us informed before anything happens. Just let us know. Do you have any recommendations to the state? Right. There was a case of when the lawyer said that during pre-trial investigation, the National Security Committee officers attend the interrogation, and they say it's like interviewing without the presence of investigator and the lawyer. How come that National Security Committee officers are involved? I don't know how we can address it, because the Code of Procedures, Code of Criminal Procedure, and the Code of Civic Procedures have all these provisions, but they are not followed. And in the chat, I also wrote that in the case of tortures, the prison officer being accused, being charged with tortures, he said that for the first time he's heard about Istanbul Protocol, even though he has a higher background, higher education. He heard of Istanbul Protocol only when he attended the pretrial investigations. Somewhat limited world outlook, and for them, the human rights is something distant. I mean, the judges cannot accurately qualify I don't know, what's the logic behind this limited knowledge? And most likely the activists would continue their work. There will be more single-person protests, but we see big support because the charges, the penalties that the government impose are being greatly supported by people, so we receive a lot of donations. So most likely this campaign would continue, and Tamerlan Insibekov was charged with 2 months in pretrial detention center. Ruslan Beketov, he is in the holding cell on administrative case. If the jail in Lobachevskovo is occupied, then he can be sent to the temporary holding facility. Well, with all the civil rights activists in Kazakhstan, Almaty, we stay in touch. We try to, push things forward, and we hope that Tamerlan would be released, because there was a case 2 years ago. Tamerlan Insibekov has already been charged under Article 274, dissemination of knowingly false statement. And if we talk about the hate speech, incitement of hatred, then let's go to TikTok and then put half of TikTokers behind the bar, because many people were there were a lot of trends among young people who used this song, especially when the war between Ukraine and Russia started. Okay, why only him? Why not putting everyone into the prison? You see, it's not about the that nobody should be imprisoned. Nobody should be behind the bars. And Article 274 should be now moved to the administrative code, because it is widely used against the HRD and civil rights activists. We have 15 minutes left, and we still have to consider a wide section of questions. And before giving the floor to Sergey Solyanik, let me say that what we discussed now, an alternative reports section is dedicated to this, including Article 174, that will be discussed in the follow-up meetings. Let me also say that the working group, the platform of civil solidarity, it's international civil society company, which prepared an analysis on additional types of punishment for the violent extremism, terrorism. And I think that this would be interesting as well. Darkhan, please follow us on the report when it is released, because it can serve as analytics. It has a section of materials. Evgeniya will prepare the part on Kazakhstan. And one more thing to you, Darkhan, the last resolution by the Constitutional Court about the protest by the by the resort of Ms. Bezhanova. So participation of the national security officers in interrogation in the absence of lawyer, and different interpretation of what happened on the case of Sergey Zinchenko and Kostana. As Zinaida said, it's a resolution. These are the court rulings, single person protest, demonstration of a jacket, and meeting to support the journalists. So meeting seems to be prohibited. Sergey Solyanik. overall progress on implementation of recommendation 139.60 on the business and human rights. If you remember, there was a meeting of the HRD with the High Commissioner. Maybe you can talk about this, Sergey. Hello, dear colleagues. I would like to thank the organizers of this meeting. My name is Sergey Solyanik, Almaty, ecological activist. More than 30 years I have been in the ecological movement. Thank you so much for the opportunity to present the National Action Plan on the business and human rights. In 2011, the UN Council on Human Rights adopted the Declaration on the business and human rights in order to remove the violations in business and human rights, and the EU Council on Human Rights requested the member states to develop the national legislation. More than 30 years passed, but national plan on business and human rights has not been developed yet. In December 8, 2023, the President of Kazakhstan signed the Action Plan on Human Rights and Rule of Law, and Section 9 in the very end of the document reads, it's about the human rights and business activity. It means establishment of the working group under the government for developing proposals on exercise of human rights, business, based on the guiding principles of the United Nations. And as far as I know, you have representatives from the state authorities. They will correct me. Maybe the commission has been established and the action plan is implemented and is developed and is underway. My short intervention will be built on the following, on the current situation, and I will be very brief in my statement. Based on the baseline assessment of business and human rights in Kazakhstan, which was carried out by United Nations with the support of Japanese embassy, and this assessment was carried out by the National Center. And it is published 2 months ago on the UN website. And let me stress that the report confirmed that there are legislative gaps on labor rights, child labor, workplace discrimination, trade unions, rights of refugees, harassment, and ecological rights. I think that you know all this, and in the process of follow-up discussions, this would be better covered. There is no public statement by the government on the compliance of human rights on the business side within the action plan on business human rights. In my deep thinking, business treats human rights the way the government treats, be it local, international business running operations in Kazakhstan. There is no political will from the top. So how the government treats the human rights, the same way businesses treats the human rights, and it's proven in practice. Another thing, Kazakhstan raises a lot of foreign investments that would take into account all the stakeholders, officers, people, environment, but it should not harm the environment and other activities. And being the ecological activists, events that take place in Kazakhstan, well, once again confirm that there is a significant problem. Let me remind you, last year it was opposition and ongoing campaign from the residents in East Kazakhstan on the gold mine in Bistebe 2 years ago. The people protested and people were detained. In Moraldy, they had protests. They want to bring people to responsibility. Kadir was directly involved in supporting this activists. So there is ongoing pressure on ecological activists. And in terms of investments, it is a situation with the deposit Kokzhede, where the operations of the foreign companies resulted in serious contamination of the potable water, which is a very important source of water for West Kazakhstan. Another thing I would like to stress your attention to as an activist, ecological activist, water. Within the framework of climate change, water becomes more expensive than gold or other fossil fuel, and let alone the violation of human rights by the government in terms of access to water. The companies have compliance with the guiding principles of United Nations. So there was a study organized, and limited number of companies have the systemic approach to human rights and business. These are largely international companies or local companies with foreign participation, and those which are quoted, which are listed. And why they are responding, why they take some steps, or at least they recognize, because this is all about money. Any financial institutions such as the World Bank, International Financial Corporation, European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, and other leading banks pay rather serious attention to the exercise of human rights, cooperation with local community, protection of interests, and so on. And those companies which are listed before, like Maraldi and some others, if those companies talk to international financial institutions after these high-profile cases, they would definitely be rejected in finance. And those companies who are responsible and they borrow money from the international market, they are very serious about all the things. Another thing that I would like to stress, some companies have the grievance complaints, but only few publish
своих работников, особенно местных населения, я считаю, достаточно слабо распространено среди компаний в Республике Казахстан. Даже если эти механизмы существуют, говорить об их эффективности достаточно сложно, потому что эффективность не очень высокая. И немаловажно для меня, допустим, было важно, что ПРООН даже признает, что нарушение прав человека компаниями в основном определяется как
recognizes the violation of
И в этом компания ориентируется в первую очередь, на мой взгляд, на общую ситуацию с правами человека.
its human rights is a medium or low level, and this reflects the overall situation with human rights and attitude of the government. There is no active movement on the top, no movement in the bottom, and there is access to remedies. The colleagues who are more experienced on this already shared their views, and the report reads the doubts in the efficacy of the court system. People do not trust in the independence of the judges. And let me also talk about ecological resolutions, is that the court rulings take too long to be implemented. And
самая большая проблема, с чем сталкиваются организации и рядом с граждан, кто не боится судебной деятельности, это выполнение даже выигранных. Выполнение решений затягивается годами и игнорируется как компаниями, так и государственными органами. В стране отсутствует механизм обеспечения исполнения договорных органов ООН по правам человека. Я думаю, уважаемые коллеги правозащитники об этом много еще будут говорить. Со своей стороны просто скажу, что, допустим, те решения, которые были выиграны общественностью Республики Казахстан в Комитете по соблюдению норм Орхусской конвенции в Женеве, последующие, применяя в судах, судебные органы игнорируют, считая, что решение Комитета по соблюдению норм Орхусской конвенции носит рекомендательный характер и не обязательно, в общем-то, к исполнению. Ну, хорошо, да, добились, решили, как бы вот мы тут на месте решаем немного по-своему. И завершая свое короткое выступление, я хотел бы еще обратить внимание, вчера достаточно, мне кажется, такое интересное было значимое заседание, расширенное заседание правительства с участием нашего президента, где он, на мой взгляд, пару таких вещей отметил, которые я хотел бы привязать к сегодняшнему выступлению. В частности, президент заявил, что многие проблемы, в том числе вызвавшие общественный резонанс, при своевременной и качественной информационной работе могли бы быть сняты в превентивном порядке. Вот масса, допустим, экологических конфликтов, то, что происходило,
a lot of ecological conflicts that took place could be resolved if the government were actively involved. And another critical issue is to raise investments to the economy. I talked about the attitude of international financial institution, violation of local rights of local companies, and failure of companies to perform their duties. General recommendations, well, they still remain in force. Those listed recommendation from coalition for the upcoming review by Kazakhstan. And one more thing to add on paragraph 5, it reads, adopting the rules for the construction permits. Let me say that it's not about construction. Every economic decision made based on rule legislation of Kazakhstan, all the public hearings are non-binding or declarative nature, and there is no mechanism in Kazakhstan. And since the moment Kazakhstan signed Aarhus Convention more than 15 years ago, in Kazakhstan we don't have any mechanism to take into account the opinions of people. Okay, people are gathered, they convene, their opinion is listened, but never reflected. Okay, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Sergey. If you have questions, please raise your hand or unmute yourself, or comment. You can comment as well. I see a comment in the chat box. Alexandra Sergazinova, journalist from Kostanay. I believe more information should be shared in the press about Tamerlan. More news should be issued. The news live 1 or 2 days, but we need to keep the public interested. Dinara Abdurahmanova, National Center for Human Rights. I would like to thank you for a recommendation on the Ombudsman's role. I will deliver the message to the leadership, Razia Nurmasheva. She is asking a link to the document which Sergey was referring to. Yes, of course. If you drop your email into the chat box, I will immediately email it to you. Yeah, drop your email here. And Togzhan Kizatova, please. Sergey, I probably misinformed and non-binding nature. It's common for public hearings in all the countries. And if businesses and government take into account the opinions, this would depend on the level of a political culture.
Носит обязательный характер, то интересно было бы узнать, каким образом это подсчитывается и насколько такая рекомендация, чтобы у нас был такой механизм в условиях, когда очень много там НПО, ТИТов, так называемых общественных деятелей, квази, скажем так, деятелей, власть может организовать фактически любые общественные слушания так, что там и
institutions can organize public hearings, and it's about transparent elections and everything. So from you as an expert, I would like to receive your recommendations for Kazakhstan, how effectively it would be in our context. Thank you.
Thank you
so much, Togzhan, for your question. Well, I don't know this experience. You might be right. Well, it will depend on the political culture of a country. If we say the public hearings, let's say in other countries, with wider outbreak of or rebellion of people, like what happened in Maraldy, Berezovka, people 100% disagree, and decision would never be taken in detriment of local community. There is Aarhus Convention with its provisions, to which Kazakhstan is a party. There are provisions, of course we can argue whether it is good or bad, provisions of Kazakhstan, legal provisions of Kazakhstan. And the big challenge in my thinking, and you may disagree, we can argue if the law is bad or good. But if the companies perform the applicable laws and regulations of Kazakhstan in the spirit of Aarhus Convention, many problems and conflicts would be resolved, leave alone the harassment of ecological activists. It's good that we have the mechanism under the Article 3.8 on the protection of environment. As Anara said, a year ago, there was a special rapporteur visiting Kazakhstan, listening to the ecological activists, and there is a appeal and there is a mechanism to communicate with such a high commissioner. And if there is a political will, yes, the key is having the political will. Thank you so much, Zhan, Sergey, and on behalf of Evgeniya Andreyuk, she shared her presentation. If you need, just drop your email in the chat box. We will share her presentation. It's about the international standards for ombudsman work on Paris and Venice principles. If you're not aware, we will definitely share a presentation of Evgeniya because she will just rush through. And let me ask you again, if you have questions or comments, the floor is still open. I don't see any hands. We have another volunteer, Zhanar Sekerbayeva, who represents Feminita. Zhanar, are you there? Yes, I'm here. Hi. Over to you. I'll be very brief. I will just tell you that we participated in submission of alternative report as part of the Universal Periodical Review, where civil society, HRD, and civic community presented. So we're waiting for the publications of recommendations because those were live and it was difficult to follow because there were so many recommendations provided. And we are happy that this year our initiative, Feminita, Kazakhstan Feminism Movement, together with other activists, we managed to have 19 recommendations related to sexual identity and sexual orientation and gender identity. It's a big success because in 2020, 4 years ago, when during the previous cycle, 47th, right, we received just 11. Now you can see 11 and 19 this year. So we hope that Kazakhstan will accept at least one of them because this would give us a legal basis to tell government that discrimination any groups, including LGBTIQ, cannot be exposed to discrimination. It's kind of a battle that Kazakhstan Union of Parents started by Bagheera Balkabayeva, who disclosed a petition or motion, and without having a proper education, she thought that there is a advocacy and propaganda of LGBTQ, and a decision by the Ministry of Culture after the final public hearings, to which the IQ community visited. We exist and we live as any other people on the earth, and we tried to defend ourselves, and we actually have won this battle. Ministry of Culture decided to approve it halfway. but we still find it as a win, as a victory. And the expert from Guatemala was referring to the LGBT community in his presentation. So 90 recommendations Kazakhstan received. Let's wait how many of them will be accepted, which of them will be noted of. So let's wait for some time before the final decisions made. And also, we widely discuss the victory of Trump on elections, and then the right for peaceful assembly. So I just wanted to say that Sekjan Blash, before making such statements, I recommend to talk to any representative, because I cannot give any information without proper knowledge. People think that Tokayev is giving a certain freedom for the peaceful assembly. Akhtogan Tarakatova and one more had protests to support Tamerlan.
Они были также взяты полицией, задержаны, привезены в участок, и на них наложены штрафы. Никаких
freedom of expression and freedom of assembly. We do not enjoy any reliefs as the members of LGBTIQ community. So please do not spread misinformation, because it's us versus you. And as for the right for peaceful assembly of LGBTQ is violated, as well as the right for peaceful assembly is violated for women who wanted to have the single person protest against counter events. So my activism, my face, our intentions, our spirit and soul are here in Kazakhstan with the gatekeepers of the law and order. We are not police, but we live in this country no matter what. Thank you so much, Zhanar, and thank you for your intervention, especially those related to recommendation on the prohibition of discrimination of any people, including LGBTIQ, and Feminita, one of the institutions, it's not registered entity, which raises attention of the state and people on the prohibition of discrimination. If you have any questions, dear participants in the Zoom. I don't see anyone. I see hand raised. Zhana, over to you, please. It's a comment and words of support to the last speaker. The point is that our society underestimates the threat of this anti-LGBTIQ movements from society, from the state, because they don't know the history, right? Frankly speaking, in the post-Soviet space, I mean, especially what happens in Russia, the wave of hatred, I mean, not only to this group of population, but in general, everything started when the psychology of people, it was like a strategy developed. So with propaganda and advocacy against people with non-traditional, with non-conventional sexual orientation. And it seemed like something ordinary, and people accepted this, and probably maybe the role of trends and tendencies is underestimated, and I think that eventually this comes to a situation something similar to Russia. So I think that unlikely among the human rights defenders there are those who support this mess. I understand, I know your story as HRD, and I want to express my support and admire your bravity. So be there, be on the forefront. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Sergey dropped a link in the chat box to UN document. Yes, right. Thank you so much. I'd like to thank all the speakers, all the participants, attendees. The live streaming and recording of this meeting would be stored at Dignity 5351 in YouTube. And I would like to thank our partners, co-organizers, OMCT, International Organization Against Torture, Evgeniya Andreyuk, and International Service for Human Rights,
International Service for Human Rights, Javier Urizar.
And interpreter who was helping us, Zhana Ustimirova. Let me remind you that today we had 3 items in the agenda: general recommendation and Ombudsman Institute and situation with business and human rights. So the next second discussion will take place on the 26th of February. I shared a link in the chat. They start at 3 p.m. afternoon time. I also shared a link for registration. 3 items in the agenda: freedom of association, reform of judiciary system, and amendments to the restrictive laws on the association and peaceful assembly. Please review the alternative report of the Coalition on the Protection of HRD and other partners in the website of Kader Kasiet in the tab report. If you go to UPR tab, you would see the link to the records of the report by the government on the 23rd of January this year, just a week ago, 6 days ago, and would like to thank you again. Zinaida is typing. I would like to thank speakers. Thank you, Zinaida, for mentioning this recommendation. Yes, indeed, the Public Association Kader Kasiet Coalition for the Adoption of Law on the Protection of HRD, International Service for Human Rights. We all work on 3 versions of the draft law. The final draft law is posted on the website in the tab report. Please read for yourself, and it is dedicated to the draft law on recognition of the role of HRD, human rights work, and creating the national mechanism for the protection of HRD. So why it is necessary, everything is on the website. And if you understand the effective remedies for the journalists, civil rights activists, lawyers in practice are not exercised. So these are not just words. There is some rationale, justification, there are some studies, there is an index, and analytics is available. There is an analysis of laws, including the barriers preventing from the human rights activity, and there are all associated documents, concept, explanatory note, which explains the need to adopt this law on the protection of HRD. Once again, thank you so much, and I would like to say in the very end that, as a matter of fact, we all do this today together with the coalition, with the colleagues from the civil society, international partners, on a free of charge basis, on a bona fide basis. We don't have any grant money. Please disseminate the knowledge. The more government and people know about the standards, international standards, what news, what update we did over the past 6 months together with colleagues. And we would be happy if you share the links to this broadcast in Russian and English. We will post it in YouTube channel. See you. Bye-bye. By the way, we will share the presentation of Javier from Dogash if you indicated your email during registration. So the meeting